sort of the biggest and broadest level of what this vision is, and talking about ultimately what are the outcomes we want to see, where do we, at the very end of this, want to be if the observation debrief cycle is working. So two things. We have shooting towards the sky here in our illustration is student achievement and core members' ability to help themselves improve. So I think on its surface, this just looks a lot like our ultimate aims and our key levers. I want to just refine that a little bit for you. So when I'm talking about student achievement improving, I think that can be like the end of every sentence we say about every action we take at an institute, and hopefully in reality it is. But I'm talking here about very direct and very measurable improvements in what students are learning that are directly connected to what's coming out of the work that CMAs are doing in the observation debrief cycle. Similarly, core members' ability to help themselves improve can kind of sound like core member effectiveness. Great, they're getting better. Well, what we really mean here is they're getting better in a very specific way. Core members are getting better at helping themselves, at thinking through and being reflective practitioners, at looking at their own data. We're improving those particular skills in our core members through the observation debrief cycle. I want to just ask if a couple of folks would be willing to share what you put in your note that you just did in the opening exercise of how you would kind of explain all of this to a principal, potentially tying into these pieces, but a couple of folks be willing to share that for us. I'm going to drop the microphone while you consider that. Thank you, Courtney.
Sure. We use the cycle for two reasons. A, it gives us a frequent way to check our kids' progress towards the goals we set for them at the end of the summer. And B, it lets us give quick feedback regarding specific actions and execution, as well as a place to show core members how to systematically reflect on the successes they're seeing, why, and what challenges they face and why. This lets us create a targeted course of action and ensures our core members leave here being able to do this on their own in their classrooms.
That sounded good to me. Anybody else want to share a response from that opening? Can literally no one compete with the Philadelphia Institute.
I said the purpose of the observation debrief cycle is to provide our core members with regular and immediate problem solving and technical assistance, particularly for areas of improvement. In addition to knowing what they are doing effectively, core members need to know which teaching actions can be improved so as to meet our student achievement goals. The observation debrief cycle is designed to provide objective evidence to the core member about teacher and student actions in the classroom, and then to provide a forum for co-investigating the root causes of some ineffective teaching.
Sounded excellent, thank you. And very clearly, I think, articulated both of those outcomes we want to get to. So thank you very much for that. At this point, what we're going to do is do a lot of what we talked about in our last session. So we said vision, and I think Beth put it so well. Vision is not just kind of this broad, big statement. It's not just this piece, but it's really being able to have a picture in your mind of what that's really going to look like. To think of week 4 in your school or across your school for our CMATs. What are you actually going to see that lets you know that these things are happening? So we're going to spend a little time now developing that vision a little more fully and painting that picture a little more clearly before we're going to move on to talking about how it is that we're going to get there. Okay, so our first piece of this, core members are on their way to increasing student achievement. I'll give you a few examples, and then in a couple minutes I'm actually going to turn things over to table facilitators to flesh out this list in a little more detail. So 1, we see core members following through on next steps. Okay? These next steps are going to be linked to student achievement. So if we're on our way to student achievement, core members are doing what they're coming out of these conversations and having read these notes, what they should be doing. Okay, when asked, core members can tell you how their next steps are going to help students learn. So we've got to see, we've got to hear core members getting that connection themselves, because ultimately that's going to be part of them taking those next steps, being invested in the process, and moving forward in a way that's going to help students learn. I might have killed the microphone before I might have did it. I'll be loud in the meantime. So you're going to flesh out that list in a little more detail in just a minute here. So our other piece of this, helping themselves grow more effective, building that reflective practice we talked about. So for many of you, this is going to look extremely familiar. We've got the 6 rows in the continuously increasing effectiveness section of our rubric. So the connection here between the academic impact model that we talked about earlier, this part of the rubric, the observation debrief cycle, are all really one and the same. We're talking about the same idea here. And in this case, we're talking specifically about this thought process that we want our core members developing of looking at their data, figuring out what's going well, what's not going well, figuring out the student actions that are related to that, figuring out the teacher actions that cause that, figuring out why they, in the first place, are taking those actions, and then learning from outside experiences to improve, and adjusting course as necessary. So very familiar to many of us, no doubt. And this is really things that we want to see. But again, getting a little more specific, how are we going to know that we're seeing that? So a few concrete things in the observation debrief cycle. If we see our core members actually coming to their co-investigation conversations with graded work, they're ready, they've got the data, they've already found some trends on their own, that's a great step in this direction. If we see core members sharing their own ideas, it should not be the CMA poking and prodding, okay? We know we're getting where we want to be if core members are having their own ideas and having their own theories in the course of a conversation. Definitely easier said than done, but it's an important part of knowing that they're getting better at this kind of thinking that we want them to be doing. So having gone through those couple of examples, I'm actually going to give you about 8 minutes right now in your table groups to flesh out that list in a little bit more detail. So for both of those things,